Who's been helping raise their families for decades.
Hi, everybody. We'll be getting started here in just a few minutes.
Come on. Be nice. I'm on. Yes.
Okay, so we had 80 something people registered for this. Right now, 48, so it's a little over half. Probably wait a couple more minutes if you want to join. It's kind of where I expect to be, around maybe half the people that registered, maybe a little more.
Hello, hello. I guess my audio is working.
Yes.
Can you see me?
Just verify. Andrea, you can't hear me? Andrea, can you hear me?
Okay, you're much better. Yeah, you were real low.
Yeah.
and-
I had the microphone up.
Gotcha. Gotcha. We're just letting everybody kind of trickle in. Nice to see so many faces. I feel like I've been.
Are you in Arkansas?
I am. I'm in Little
Okay.
Rock.
Okay. I have a DNA match cousin in Little Rock.
Ooh, yeah,
I know.
awesome. Love it when you can connect those dots.
It's all those other dots that are hard to connect.
Yeah. Makes your mind kind of swirl.
It does.
Awesome. Jean, I see you're here. She gonna talk? Jean Rollberg?
Yes. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Glad to see you. Are you in the state or out of state?
In right now.
In right now. Awesome. Hello, Tisha. Glad to see
Hey, how's it going?
you. Good.
Good.
Where are you? Are you in New York?
Yes, I'm in New York.
Hey, awesome. Glad to have you here.
Yes, happy to be here.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome. I got a lot of things on my screen, so I feel like I'm going to be distracted. Scott, do you want me to get started, or do you want to say something to get started?
No, you go ahead and get started, I guess.
Okay.
Okay. Well, one thing I'll say is, once you actually get started with the presentation, I'm going to mute everybody. Andrea, do you want them to be able to unmute themselves so they can ask questions, or how do you want to handle that?
Yes, probably at the end. Or what do you?
Okay, so when I mute them, I can either make it so that they can unmute themselves or they can't unmute themselves. So which way would you rather?
Yeah, I'd like it that
Of course.
they be able to unmute themselves to ask questions.
Oh, you do want them to be able to.
Right.
Okay, all right, yes, all right, I'll do it that way then. All right,
Okay.
so I guess the rule is during a presentation, if you have a question, you can either type it into the chat or you can just turn on your microphone and ask. Okay.
That sounds good, especially if I go too fast. Okay. Here we go.
Okay, all right, and I'm going to go ahead and mute. And Andrea, this may, I think we'll mute you,
Let me mute
so
me.
you'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi, and welcome to our Zoom tonight. We are holding this for the Arkansas Genealogical Society. We're very excited to have all of you guys here participating. Next week, we're having a conference here in Arkansas. So any of you guys local, we're going to tell you more about that at the end, but we'd love to see you on Zoom or in person. At our conference, we're going to have a great speaker, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. My name is Andria Jacobian. I am new to the DNA circle, but I am obsessed. So once I did a DNA test, I jumped in all the way, nonstop. So I have been obsessed ever since. So today we are going to do a presentation on a missing relative. I'm sure I've been doing genealogy for about 22 years. And so there are times that you have a relative who just kind of goes missing, whether it's, you just can't find them, or maybe the census didn't count them or whatever, or maybe they were a child and they just show up once they're an adult. So in this case, we're going to talk about a person that just kind of goes nowhere, and whether or not we can track them down using DNA and figuring out where they went, what happened. So a little bit about me. Here's the gawkiest picture of me, but it's with two of my favorite people, my grandparents. They helped raise me. I spent all my weekends at their house in a small town in Tennessee, where I grew up. And they told me lots of stories about their lives when they were young. My grandmother, whom my son is named after, her last maiden name was Blake, and his name is Blake. And so my grandmother told me about her Swedish-born twin mother and her twin. They were born in Sweden out of wedlock. And so, of course, doing DNA, I am still looking for that unknown Swedish great-grandfather. And so this is a picture of the twins. I believe the one on the left side is my great-grandmother, and then her twin and her mother, and that is their stepfather, and then their brothers that they had years later, once they came to America from Sweden. And my grandfather told me all about growing up in Jerome, Indiana. I was privileged enough to meet my great-grandmother. She's the little one in the back with the big glasses before she passed away. And it's always a privilege to meet your great-grandparents if you don't get that opportunity. He told me stories how my great-grandmother married both my great-grandfather, who was a Smith, Walter Smith, and his brother. But for years, we knew she married a man named Art Smith. But my great-grandfather didn't have a brother named Art. He had a brother named William, and he had a brother named James. But James's name was James A, and we all believed it to be James Andrew. But after years and years of digging and research, we learned that his name was James Arthur, and he went by Art. And she signed his death certificate when Art passed away. And so I was finally able to dig through some records and confirm that that story was actually true. I had given up for that to be a family lore for a long time, but eventually I was able to prove it to be true. So those people inspired me to do genealogy. So after doing that for several years, I finally took a DNA test in 2018. And I grew up with a stepfather, but knew of my biological father. And so I thought, well, once I did a DNA test, I guess I better change my father to my real father, because DNA-wise, it's not going to match up. Well, after I did that and I did my DNA test, I could not find any connections to that Hanner line. I thought, oh, how weird. I was missing a whole set of connections. So one of my cousins through my birth father had done a DNA test, and she and I connected. And finally, one day I got brave and I said, hey, can I take a look at your DNA matches? Can I see what yours looks like? And sure enough, she gave me access. She showed them to me. She had Hanner connection, Rippy connections, SQ connections, and I had none. I was missing them all because his father is not his biological father, and DNA proved. It took me about 6 weeks to figure out the two brothers, one of which is my grandfather, but that cousin and I, we are still connected through Grace Edith Richards. And so I was able to learn my family lore after 6 weeks after I did a DNA test. So now I'm very passionate about DNA, what DNA says about you, what you've inherited, what you haven't inherited. And I talk to people about Skittles. Sometimes you get all the Skittles, and sometimes you don't get very many Skittles from certain grandparents. And so it's important to collaborate with other people and put your heads together and figure out what you're missing, or what they have and you don't have and stuff. And if you're really truly missing it, you know, because in this case, I was missing some close connections on that Hanner line that just weren't there because I had a different biological grandfather. All right, so let's get into this missing relative case study using DNA. So a friend of mine had some ancestors that we were looking up, and that's what brought me to this story. So let me introduce you to Roy E. Cook, we believe. You know, he was born around 1880 and died in 1918. He lived in Oregon, and we wanted to know, who are Roy Cook's parents? Couldn't find anything on his parents. The name Cook, very much like Smith, we just couldn't find his parents. I went all the way across the country. I went to Illinois, found some people who might be his parents, but I just couldn't pinpoint it. Then let me introduce you to Mr. William H. Babcock. He was born in 1840 in Cornwall, Orange, New York. Some believe he died in January 1902. He was the son of David Babcock and Caroline Conklin, and he eventually married Sarah Yeoman. And so these are the two men we are going to focus on today. William and Sarah had a ton of children. They had 11 children: Horace, Mary Margaret, Elizabeth, Anne, Clarissa, Phoebe, Samuel, Daisy, David, Willie, and Charles. And so when you have so many children and so many lines, DNA is just great. The more lines there are, the more connections that you can make between those kids. You don't have to line them all up, but you need a lot there. If there's only one child, it's much harder in the family. And we know in those older days, there were a lot of children. So let's go back to Roy. Here's a little information we have about Roy from a newspaper article from January 2nd, 1919. Death relieves insane man. R.E. Cook, former resident of Woodburn, who recently came here from D, died at the city prison Saturday while authorities were preparing his commitment to the Pendleton Insane Asylum. To avoid violence, Mr. Cook, age 38, was placed in a cell the first of the week. Mr. Cook is survived by a wife and two small children, all of whom are ill with influenza. He was recently ill with influenza himself, and Health Officer Edgington believes abbreviation of the mind resulted from complications following the attack. So, I mean, something big happened in this man's life that he just kind of went crazy while out in the woods. Then we have another article from a couple days earlier that says Roy E. Cook was working as a logger for the Oregon Lumber Company at D. He was found yesterday in Hood River, insane. He was taken to the city hall but expired this morning as doctor was about to hold an examination. His wife is seriously ill from influenza, and it is believed this preyed on his mind. They think he's from Woodburn. So, I mean, we've got two different articles with a couple different details giving us more information and a bigger picture of who Roy E. Cook was and what was going on in his life just leading up to his death. And then this is the same article, Death Relieves Insane Man, telling us he is 38 years old. What it doesn't tell us is that his wife and two small children are ill, but she's pregnant with a third child. So there's going to be a third child born after he has passed away. And so between these two articles, we can conclude that Roy E. Cook was born about 1880, and then he died on December 28th, 1918. He was working as a logger. He's got a wife. He's got two kids. He's 38 years old. The family is sick with influenza, and he has gone insane. I wonder what's happened in his life that made that happen. I mean, you never know what's going on with people. So we're going to go through all the genealogical records to find out what is it we know about William Babcock. So William Babcock, here's a newspaper article from New York, the Chinook Mountains. And it is telling us that the William Babcock's family is a huge family. They inhabit Chinook Mountain above Mountainville. They eke out a miserable existence. They beg and they cut hoop poles. His family consists of a wife and 5 children, and they've put in a terrible winter this year. The house where they reside is a mere hut, doesn't have a chimney, doors, or windows, and it has very little furniture. Last week, he had a son aged 10 years and a girl aged 15. Both died on the same day. While sick at the house at the time, the mother and 2 other children were ill as well. No physician visited them, and the isolation was so bad that their neighbors didn't know how destitute their house was, their living conditions were, until the father came out and announced that his 2 children had died of the 5 that he had at the time. The neighbors afterwards visited the place and the scene and said the hut was just unlivable, and that the 2 children lay dead, and the mother and 2 sick children were laying on the floor with the only door they had was off its hinges, and the fire in the old broken down pipeless stove was almost gone. The house wasn't sufficient for anybody to live, let alone 7 people, 5 children and 2 adults. And so we delve into William's family and what all's going on, and we find this newspaper article from 1880 that says the whole family is fighting. A dispatch from Newburgh last night says the family, during a family affray at Mountainville, David Babcock was clubbed, probably fatally. His son, grandson, and 2 cousins were engaged in a fight. The parties were intoxicated, and James Babcock, a cousin, was arrested. All were more or less wounded. David Babcock died from this incident. So, the family is large and they're fighting. Clearly, they're drinking. And they live in horrid conditions. And so, the other article says they eke out a miserable existence, and that just kind of says it all. And you feel sorry for this family, but wonder what else is going on that may have brought them to this point in time. And sometimes we find out those answers, and sometimes we can't find those answers. So we're going to look ahead and look at military records. So we see that William Babcock enlisted in the Army in 1861 and was discharged in 1862. So he went to war at the Civil War, or he went to war during the Civil War. And then we learn later that he was wounded at the Battle of Bull Run, and that rendered him unfit for further duty. So he was discharged. So we've got a muster roll on him. So now that we've looked at some of the records for William, let's look at what records we have for Roy Cook. So here's a record checklist. So if you're going to do a checklist for any of your families, you've got to go through their lifespan, every census that they should be living in, every birth index that they should be at, marriage, death, children born, just all the list of records in their lifespan to know, are they missing anywhere? So we find Roy Cook in 1912, and he has applied for a marriage license, and it's been printed in the Albany Democrat newspaper in Albany, Oregon. A marriage license was issued today by the county clerk for the marriage of Roy E. Cook and Miss Ina Wilbanks, a popular young couple from Sheds. Okay, so Ina is the mother that was the wife, or the mother that was pregnant at the time that Roy was sick and died. So here is their marriage announcement, August 16, 1912. Then here is the official document of their marriage license. I did comb through this marriage license, checking out the clergymen and the 2 witnesses to see what connection. I couldn't find a connection, so it must have been like a family friend or something. And it looks like the witness, Archie Leach, and the clergyman is also a leech. So they're probably, father, son. And then we have the find a grave record, where the newspaper articles all tell us he died and was buried in Oregon. So find a record confirms his death. And the newspaper tells us about when he was born. Then we have the index, we have the index for the marriage record. Here is Roy's from 1912. I couldn't find Ina's, but here is Roy's. So we've got 3 different marriage records, right? We've got the actual marriage document, we've got a newspaper announcing the marriage, and then we've got the document they went and filed, which led to the newspaper article. So here's our checklist for Roy. We don't find him in the 1880 census, which we don't know when in 1880 he was born, so we don't know if he was counted that year. We don't have him in the 1900 census, can't find him in 1910. There's no real true birth index that tells us that his birthday was in 1880. We are just guessing from the newspaper article that tells us he's 38 years old. We've got several different kinds of marriage records, and we've got a death index. All our good records that we have them from various different angles, but we don't have one census on Roy. So we're going to go through all of the records that we do have for William Babcock. Okay, here's our record checklist: 1840, 1850, 1860, 70, 80, 1900, 1910. We want a birth index, we want a military record, we want a marriage record, and we need that death index or record. So 1850, we find out that he was born in 1843. So some records tell us he was born in 1840, some say 43. So here's the 1850 census telling us he is 7 years old. He lives in Cornwall, New York, and he's with his parents, David Babcock and Carolyn Conklin, along with some of his siblings. In 1860, they're still in Cornwall, New York. He's now 17, so that's consistent on the age. He's still living with David and Caroline, his parents, and all of his siblings. In 1880, we can't find him in 1870, so maybe they weren't counted or something, because in 1880, they're still in the same place, Cornwall, New York, still with his parents. Oh, no, now he is married. William is married to Elizabeth Yeamans, and they're starting a family. They've got a 17-year-old all the way to 8-year-old. In 1900, the family has moved. William was born in New York, but now he's living in Vernon, Sussex, New Jersey. He is the head of the household, and he's widowed, so his wife has passed away. And he appears to be living with some of his adult children and also some of his grandchildren. James Fennell down at the bottom appears to be the son of one of the daughters. So here's our record checklist. No 1840 census, because we believe he was born in 43. We do have him in 50. We have him in 60. Couldn't find him in 70, but he appears to be in the same place. In the 1880 census, he's there, the 1900 census, and we can't find him in 1910. The birth index, we've got several census that backs us up saying that he was born in probably 1843, even so some records say 1840. We have a military record because he was wounded in the Battle of Bull Run. We have not a marriage record, but the census confirms that he got married. He married Elizabeth Yeamans, and they had lots of children, and no death record for William Babcock anywhere that I could find, even though a couple of families had his death date as 1902. So we go to the DNA, because once we stop with the records and we can't find anything else, the next thing to do is to go to the DNA and see how we can connect things. So the relatives of Roy E. Cooks came to me and said, hey, we want to find out who Roy's parents are. So that's why we were seeking this out. So Roy's relative, Brandon Cook, who is Cecil Cook's grandson. Cecil was one of those sick kids when Roy passed away with influenza, and later that year, the third child was born. So Cecil was the oldest child of Roy at that point. His wife, Inez Wilbanks. So when we looked at the DNA, Inez Wilbanks and her parents were clearly there. So we were looking at Roy's. So the first match we came across that we just really couldn't fit anywhere else in Brandon's family tree is this 180 Centimorgan match. She's got two family trees, a Kerwin family tree and a Finner family tree. Does that last name sound familiar? Let's take a look. So in the 1900 census, William is living with his kids and grandkids, and there's a James Fennell. A little bit different spelling, different name, could be the same, maybe. So let's take a look. So this is our 180 Centimorgan match, and she is the daughter of James Fenner, who is the son of James Fenner, who is the son of Mary Babcock, one of William Babcock's children. So this is the same tree from that 1900 census where the son, James Fenner from 1887 is living there. So, you know, here's a good match, and it brings us all the way to William Babcock and Elizabeth Babcock, or Neiman's. Then I decided, because I kept seeing the name Babcock, I decided to go through. You got multiple options. You can search a surname, or you can search a person's name in your DNA matches. So I thought, let's take a shot at matching the name Babcock as just anybody's username. And as you can see, I had a whole host of matches using some form of Babcock in their matches. And so again, that's solidifying that the Babcock name is there. I mean, even at 119 Centimorgan matches. Then we go to another match and we find this 57 Centimorgan match, and we see the name Elizabeth Babcock in the tree at the very bottom. And we are able to connect Elizabeth Babcock all the way back to David Babcock and Caroline Conklin. So again, we're starting to form a pretty good circle around this Babcock theory as to whether or not Roy Cook's father is a Babcock in some way. All right, then we start to look at David Babcock's wife, Carolyn Conklin, and I start noticing that I have current day Conklin family members in my tree. So that means descendants with the Conklin name are carrying on, because, you know, William married a female, so they changed their name to Babcock. So I'm looking at the male line carrying that name down, and sure enough, I found one whose grandfather's name was Conklin, and that's a 59 Centimorgan match. So then we go through some more trees looking for those names and I'm trying to weed out anybody who's a Babcock. So I find 115 Centimorgan match who is strictly a Conklin and is not a Babcock at all. So here is our 115 Centimorgan match family tree. She goes through Alfred Gordon, then to McCain, and then Sarah Conklin, who is the daughter of Peter Conklin and Emmeline Twitchell, which is Caroline Conklin's parents. So there we are, we're forming a circle around the parents behind William Babcock. Okay, so here's a whole list of the Babcock, the Conklin matches. That some of them are Babcocks and some of them are not. So we're just trying to make a list and make sure we have both connectors. So we're starting to form a circle. We've got David Babcock confirmed. We've got Carolyn Conklin confirmed. Now what we want to do is find Sarah Yeaman's matches. And as we started with 180 centimorgan match with Babcock to about 50, we want to find something similar for Yeaman. So we start looking for that. So I'm able to build trees back and see that the Yeamans are marrying the Babcocks in 1700. That's kind of skewing my results because, you know, if you're a Babcock and you're a Yeaman, it's gonna kind of, so I have to kind of ignore those people. I don't want to see people who are intermarrying into the two lines. Then in the 1800s, I see the Yeamans are marrying the Conklins. And we have Conklin matches. And so again, I'm not finding a Yeaman who's just a Yeaman and not a Conklin, not a Babcock. And that's what I have to do to confirm that William Babcock's wife is the mother. So I cannot find any Yeaman matches. None of them are strictly Yeamans from 50 centimorgans to 200, which tells me that connection is not there. Okay, so here is William Babcock's story. He was born in around 1840 in New York State. He is the son of David Babcock and Carolyn Yeaman. He served in the Civil War. Sorry, that's Carolyn Conklin. He served in the Civil War. He married Sarah Yeaman and he had 11 kids. Sorry, the dog. So here is somebody, a family member's tree that has a death date for William Babcock, January 1902. And so William is very well documented, but that death date on anybody's tree, there was no source. There was no death index. I'm guessing maybe it came from somebody's family Bible. Somebody said, hey, so-and-so died. Somebody wrote it down because a lot of people had it, whether they copied it over or not, I'm not sure. But so we notice he's very, very well documented, but his death isn't documented anywhere. So that brings us to the marriage license issued to Roy E. Cook. We're coming to the conclusion that Roy E. Cook is William Babcock. You know, they think he died in 1902, but here he is in 1912 about to get married, and people think he's a popular young couple. He's about 69 to 72 years old, and they think he's young. He must have the fountain of youth. You know, that's great. That's great. They think he's young, but he's gone across the country from New Jersey all the way to Oregon, and he started a new life, having a new wife, having new children. And here is his 1917 draft registration. He's applied as Roy Edward Cook with his birth date, December 1880. And if we look over at his description, his height is medium, his build is medium, his eyes are blue, and his hair is gray. So 37-year-old Roy E. Cook has gray hair in 1917. It's not unheard of for a 30-year-old to have gray hair. But keep in mind, William Babcock is actually close to 70, maybe even past 70. So here's our checklist again. We know where William Babcock is almost every step of his life until his death, and we can't find his death. We don't know where Roy Cook is every step of his life until he marries and dies. So we come to the conclusion that William Babcock is Roy Cook. Around 1900, 1910, 1902, he must have disappeared. He goes from New Jersey all the way to Oregon. We pick him up, and 10 years later, 1912, we don't know where he is in 1910. Can't find him in 1910. And then all of a sudden he dies. 38-year-old man dies. Well, you know, he's 70 something when he died. So I have to go back to William's terrible article about when his 2 children died on a singular day because the whole family was sick. And I know that had to be hard, traumatizing even. But could you imagine when life just spiraled and repeated itself when he made a new life as Roy Cook, and his wife and his children were seriously ill in the middle of the pandemic, the influenza pandemic. And maybe he thought they were going to die because 2 of his children died back in New York. And so, you know, you can't help but worry and think that the man just went crazy as his life repeated itself in 2 different places. So here's the final piece of the puzzle. This was a document I had long before the DNA, but Ina Cook applied for Roy Cook's Civil War pension. Now, Roy Cook, as far as we know, was not born until 1880, and the Civil War was around 1861. Roy wasn't alive. But on this pension, she listed that his aliases were William Cook and William Babcock. So she knew his real name. She probably knew his real age because Roy Cook wasn't old enough to have a pension from the Civil War. So the gist is, the more children a family has, the better the chance of finding a missing relative. DNA is awesome because you can just pinpoint those connections, even if you don't know where you came from. Many adoptees are using this information because their DNA is laced with their relatives' information, and we are able to find it. So here is Brandon Cook's actual family tree. He's the grandson of Cecil Cook. He is the great-grandson of William Babcock, and he is the second great-grandson of David Cook and Carolyn Conklin. So William Cook became Roy Cook after time. So here are reasons that people go missing. They might be involved in a crime. Many of our relatives goes to a new country as they immigrated over. Abandon a family and starts a new family. Modern day witness protection program. Kidnapped, missing later in life. So I think about J.C. Lee Dugard when I think about this. I mean, she would have been on the census noted as J.C. Lee Dugard, and then about when she was 20 on the census, she was either cataloged as her other person or not even cataloged at all. And now that she's been found and gone back to normal life, she's on the census again. So imagine what her census is going to be in 100 years. Other reasons people go missing is running from something, mental issues, forbidden love. So this is it. Our relative missing case study is the old man, William Babcock, left the East Coast and went to the West Coast, started a new life, new wife, new children. And, you know, he just wanted a new start. Scott, do you have that poll that I asked for?
Yes.
Okay.
I think you want me to go ahead and launch that poll now?
Yes, please. I have a poll question for everybody. I'm having trouble stopping my share. So please take a vote. Do you think this evidence proves Roy Cook is William Babcock. That's cool. I've never seen it in real time like that. Oh, we got some nayers. Ooh, I'm curious to hear your 2 cents worth. All right. I want to hear it. I want to hear the argument. Okay, it looks like it's about 86-14. I'd love to hear from you guys that don't think I proved it. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, somebody said that they would like a probably choice.
Yeah, yeah. I wish there was a probably. I get it. Because just when you think you've proved it, you know, something may come up that you're like, oh, maybe I didn't prove it. My mouse is just having problems right now. I'm going to get it in just a second. I'm going to stop the share. Did I do it? I did it. I did it. I did it. I'd love to hear from you guys. Now's the time to open your mics, and especially you guys, your nayers. Give me an argument, or give me what you think I need to hunt for, because I probably need to write it down. Quiet bunch. Nobody has questions or thoughts?
Well, one thing I would suggest as a possibility is that they're maybe not the same person, but they're closely related, like a father-son or something like that, and therefore their DNA is very similar. And this thing about the Civil War pension is just a lie, that she needed money and she thought, well, I can claim that he's really his father, and that was father's name. So there's some possibilities there. That would be difficult to prove with DNA, because if they are like father-son,
yeah,
they
but
would be so close in DNA.
That mother's DNA, William's wife's DNA, is not in there. There's no close matches. That was the thing I was trying to prove, is if I could find the mother, I can prove it's one of the kids. Probably can't figure out which one it is. There's so many, but that human DNA, I mean, there was very distant connections, and every connection had a Babcock or a Conklin, but there was no clear human DNA. Anybody else? You can unmute yourself if you're having problems.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see Susan's comment about how the pension card actually did prove it?
Yes. Ooh, they had to file proof. Cool.
Yep. Yeah.
I wish I could get a hold of that document, that proof document. Yep.
Can you show the file on the screen again?
Sure. Let me see if I can get to it. Share screen. Let me. Whoop. Whoop. Do I have it up right? There you go. Whoop. Sorry. I hit too many things. You guys having trouble seeing the stuff at the top? That's where all the information is. Might be hidden by the Zoom stuff.
Andrea, did you find proof that she was granted and paid the pension?
Ooh. I guess not. So this is the application number. So yes, I guess, yes, I need to look for a payment record of some sort.
sometimes I've seen accompanying affidavits from people who knew the soldier in question and could vouch that they did serve at certain times with certain commanding officers. So that should be in the records somewhere, fold 3 or somewhere.
Okay, very good. I will certainly look for that. Yep.
Well, I voted that I thought that you had adequate proof. What threw me off though was actually the age thing. You know, how somebody that's 67 years old, I mean, oh yes, I'm just 20 over here. You know, it's like you take one look at me and say, oh, you little liar, you know. I think that would be your.
I don't know how they did it, and even the newspaper said a popular young couple. I'm like, where are they getting that information from? How often do you see that in a marriage announcement?
I have a question that's kind of like off this particular case and just in general, if that's okay to ask.
Sure.
Okay. I'm on Ancestry, as my primary one and where I started. And recently I went over and did Family Search, which seems to have records that you can't find anyplace on Ancestry. And I was just wondering if there are any sites that you don't have that you use that you don't have to pay $1 million for, that has given you a lot of information since you've been at this for a really long time.
I use it less nowadays, but I used Chronicling America for a while, which was basically just a newspaper. It doesn't get a lot. There's not a ton of newspapers like at newspapers.com, but there's kind of some really old, and like it'll only have one edition of this or that. But I found some really good stuff at Chronicling America. But Fold and Ancestry and Family Search. I even just use Google because a lot of people have their family trees up there, and they might have some like birth dates or death dates that you can't find, that now at least it's there, so you go searching a little bit further. You're like, okay, they died about this time, and so you're digging, trying to find, because sometimes you can't find it because the Babcock is spelled completely wrong or whatever. But I did find some Babcocks using the name Cook. That's what made me go and look.
I have a suggestion too for it's American Ancestors. I think it's .org.
American
Ancestors site. If there's a fee, it's pretty minimal.
.org. Okay, thank you.
And if you go to Family Search Wiki, have you used that, Diane?
No, because I thought that there was some information, I don't remember what site it was, but that they were not on the up and up, that they were selling your information, or they were doing something with your information that the article went on to say that you really shouldn't use that site.
Oh no, that's my main site that I use all the time, and I've never had that problem. But if you go into their Family Search Wiki and you go into their search and go into Wiki and type in the record you're looking for or the area you're looking for. So if they're Arkansas, for example, you look at Arkansas genealogy, and it will give you all kinds of websites that you can look up, and usually it will tell you whether you have to pay for that website or if it's free.
Yeah, because I am looking for mystery people, actually, great grandparent wise, in Arkansas. There are people that just appeared, and I can't find anything on them. I mean, I can find a certain amount of things, but as far as where they came from and any census beyond the ones when they actually got married, I can't find anything before that.
My best luck with Southern records is land records, and then naturalization records if they came into the country as immigrants.
My great grandpa was an immigrant, we think.
Yeah. So go from what you know and backwards, but try land records or tax records, because there's so many lost records in the South that might help you.
And that is within, it's within which, within the ancestry thing?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
I find a lot of those on Ancestry under the card catalog, and then
Mhm.
Family Search. Like I said, I go to Wiki too, just for a resource to find out what's available to look at.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Keep talking. You're welcome to keep talking.
Well, I'll still keep talking. I have 1,000 questions. I'm die of the 1,000 questions, okay? Is there any place where you can find out, I have kids that this would be a grand uncle of mine. Family rumor was that he murdered his wife, and it looks like he did. I found some newspaper articles and spoke to his granddaughter. But they had, there were 4 kids when this happened, that were very young. And is there any way that I can find out? I found one when she was 16, she was a ward of the state. Is there any site that I could use to find stuff like that? Or is that all a privacy thing and you can't find out information like that?
Well, I've got a couple in my family that were orphans or in and out of orphanages, and I have called various places, and it just seems, because maybe privacy, maybe issues, they just didn't keep those records very well.
Yeah.
And so I wish I could get a hold of them too. But I just, maybe someday, I'm hopeful for the thought that somebody has them, and at some point they'll hand them over to one of the companies like Ancestry or the government or whatever, and they may make them available. But I have looked as well, and I've called the businesses that they've changed the names they've changed under, trying to get them, and they just kind of skirt you around. Call here, call there, and you never get your questions answered. Anybody else? Okay, well,
I wish what Ancestry would invent would be a translator. When you look at records, supposedly my great grandfather came from Germany, and I can't find, he's one of the mystery people. No record of him getting here. We have just a family letter that said that he had arrived around 1870. And, but then when you try and hunt some of those records, I don't know how to read German. So it's impossible. It would be nice if they would add that as even like if you had to do a pay service or pay by something, for that portion of it, somebody that could translate records.
Yeah, I agree. For a while I had the worldwide subscriptions, and then I would print it off and take it to my aunt who spoke German, and she's like, "Oh yeah, this is this is a building transaction between one person and the other person," and one of them was the correct person, but it didn't give me any viable information like I was looking for. Somebody had their hand raised. Unmute yourself and you should be able to ask your question.
Was it for Nestor Sheeler?
Yes.
Okay, that's me. Thank you. And thanks to the people that responded to my questions about taxes. The question that I wanted to ask was that I have several, this is a little bit off of DNA, but again, tracking down lost relatives. I have several of those very old postcards that were taken throughout the time that have a photo on the front. I don't know if those records or the photographer's files are shared any places. Anybody have any idea about those? I'm trying to, some of them I'm trying to recreate, and others I'm just trying to identify the people if at all possible.
Hmm. I don't know of anything. Scott, do you know of anything? But that would be a great thing. You know, people, who is it that has like I guess they're war letters. Would that be the Library of Congress? Because you see on the TV shows that they go and they're able to get a few little letters here and there. So I'm not real sure. I haven't been to the archives up in DC about what they have. So
Okay, thank you. I'll keep poking around, and I'll try Dead Fred.
that'd be great.
Yeah, one comment about the German documents. Just as you English, if you get back far enough, the handwriting becomes very difficult to understand because they form their letters different. And the same thing is true in other languages. So if you look at really old German documents, they may not be readable by somebody, you know, a modern German speaker, or at least very difficult to understand. So that's an issue as well.
So if you have a subscription to Family Tree magazine, you can go on there online, and they have a German genealogy cheat sheet. It's about 8 pages that you pay $10 for, and you can print it out. And it does give you some of the old script letters, so it can help you determine what you're looking at.
Yeah, if you already know modern German.
Well, it gives you some of the keywords as well that you look for, like
Okay.
Taufen would be baptism and things like that. So it gives you general genealogical terms to look for.
Okay.
It's really helpful.
Great information.
Okay, I have one more if nobody else is going to talk. Where my lost grandparents were married in Bay, Arkansas. If we wanted to take a road trip, my sister and I, down to Arkansas, where should we go to try and find records in Arkansas? Like the land tax records, anything like that, or if there's something. I mean, I have their marriage certificate, and they were in 2 censuses, 80 and 1900. But where is there a good place where, you know, all the records are stored?
I would say that the archives, the state archives, would be definitely a place to look. They have a lot of things, some of which is online and searchable, you know, from the web, and some isn't.
Where is the state archives? What city?
It's in downtown Little Rock.
Little Rock. Okay.
It's behind the
It's
state capitol.
open to it's open to the public.
Yeah.
And they're very helpful.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, next week, if you can see my screen, next week, we want to remind you that if you're in Arkansas, we would love to see you at our fall conference. It's Friday, October 14th and 15th at the Benton Event Center, just south of Little Rock. You can register now. We still have the early bird rates going on until Sunday. Lindsay Heflin is going to speak on Friday. She's from the Arkansas Crime Library or Crime Lab. And so she's going to tell us about how DNA is revolutionizing her job as they're looking for criminals, basically. And then on Saturday, we're excited to have Diane Southard come down and spend the day and talk to us all about Diane. If you've ever seen any of Diane's videos or recordings, she simplifies DNA so much. I'm so impressed with how simple she can make DNA, because it's such a complicated thing. You can register right now at argensoc.org. We'd love to have you, or you put your phone up and scan that code, and it will take you straight to it to register. On Thursday, we'd love to have you back Our president, Scott Lee, is going to do a Zoom. Scott, you want to give us a little preview of your Zoom?
Okay, so I'm going to try to cover some of the aspects of how to use DNA. And I'm trying to avoid anything biological or technical about how cells divide and that sort of thing. That was in fact my first thought in designing this presentation. And then I thought, no, you don't really need to understand those things. So I removed all that. It's try to make it as non-technical as possible. But I'll talk about the different types of DNA tests. There's 3 basic types. I'll talk about those and what they're good for, what companies sell them, and which are the better companies. They're all good companies, but some are bigger than others, and if they have a bigger user base, that means that you're more likely to have better and more connections. So I'll talk about that, and then go through some examples of how to use the DNA to figure out how you're related to other people on your match list, and some of the issues that come up where you might think that you figured something out and where you actually haven't. And so I'll talk about some of that and show you some one particular example where I will almost convince you that something is true until I point out one other possibility that says maybe it's not true. So it's just kind of some details about how to use DNA and what things to look for and what to be careful of in your assumptions.
Awesome.
Okay, and that's Thursday night.
Thursday night at 6:30. So same time as tonight's. So we look forward to having you back. If you come to the conference, come say hi to us. We'd love you to come talk to us and let us know you attended one of these Zooms. Sally, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Your conference on Saturday, are you going to record those? If we pay, can we get a recording of that, or could we watch it? Well, I just went to another conference where they recorded the sessions and they made them available for a month afterwards. And unfortunately, I can't be there on Saturday, and so I just wondered if you were going to be able to do that or had thought about it.
Andrea, have you made any kind of arrangements for that recording?
We know we can record and keep it for 30 days for Diane, but right now we're trying to figure out the ramifications of holding a recording on our website. Didn't you say we were having some issues there, Scott?
Well, yes, the website, the way it's set up, they prohibit putting up video because just the amount of bandwidth that it uses up. So that was not going to be an option.
That's what we found with the conference in Illinois that I attended, and wanted to look later at the recordings. And yeah, it became a problem of storing the stuff. And we had a special link. It wasn't on their website. They sent us links to it. So I don't know. I'm not technical enough to know how they did it. But you're saying Diane has videos out there, YouTube videos?
Probably YouTube. I see them on Facebook most of the time, but yes, I would search her name, and she's got a website, so there's probably videos on that website as well. But it's small little snippets, and it's just, I'm telling you, it's very simple, and I'm just like, man, I wish I could do. So yeah, check her out, and we'll work on that. Because yeah, at the very least, maybe we could send out a Google Drive to our Zoom participants so that they can watch it in 30 days. Because yeah, we're gonna have to make it expire in 30 days for Diane's purpose. Anything else?
And I want to remind you that it is hybrid, so you can either attend in person or on Zoom. And it's a large facility. That we will have lots of space. if you're concerned about COVID and contamination, and you will be able to social distance pretty well. And we're going to encourage, not going to require, but we're going to encourage people to wear masks. So if we want people to feel safe if you want to come in person.
Yes. Sounds great. I can't wait to see everybody. I'll be back here on Thursday, will you? All of you?
Okay, well,
All
good
right.
to see all of you.
Anything else, Scott? We good?
I think that's it.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Good night.